Hello there, and welcome to Sandbox, the podcast brought to you by Buro Happold. Each month we ask those big questions about our world, the built environment, and the way we humans interact with it. For this month's episode, I'm in my gym jams, in a soothingly lit room, having just been listening to the calming sounds of a windswept meadow. And why? Well, this month's episode of Sandbox is called How Buildings Affect Your Sleep, Stress, and Productivity Without You Even Noticing. And what a fascinating learning curve I've been on. I've always been dimly, excuse the pun, aware of the importance of lighting and sound on my well-being, but I had no idea quite how important optimal lighting and sound is to our mental well-being, and what a profound difference design choices can make. Good lighting and sound is intentionally and holistically baked into building design these days, thanks to branches of engineering led by lighting designers and acousticians, which is one of my new favourite words, acousticians. And as luck would have it, I'm joined in my soothingly lit and acoustically optimised booth by Buro Happold experts from these two fields, Daniel Bailey and Lena Kalpakidi. Daniel, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do and why you do it.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for the superb introduction. So, hi, I'm Dan. I have been working as an acoustician since I think about 2012, and I've been at BH for about 8 years now, working in the London office. And I've been recently working in the residential design and the neurodiversity space as a bit of a speciality as well.
Yes, that's definitely something that we'll talk about. Absolutely. Dan, it's lovely to have you on the panel. Welcome. And welcome to Lena. Lena, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, I'm Lena, and I'm a senior lighting designer in Buro Happold, located in the Edinburgh office. So my background is in interior design, and after working as an interior architect for some years, I realized how crucial lighting is in shaping our environments. So this led me to complete a master's degree in architectural lighting in Sweden. My career as a lighting designer began at BH almost 10 years ago. As a senior lighting designer now, I've been fascinated by the endless possibilities of lighting.
It's lovely to have you both on. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much. So, we're going to kick off with a biggie. What I want to start by talking about is why you two do the jobs you do. I mean, I'll be honest, when I think of building design, I think of energy and efficiency and aesthetics. But in terms of lighting and acoustics, what are the negative health effects of poor design? And so what I'm asking really is, why do we need you? And I will go to Lena. Lena, I'll go to you first, please.
Poor lighting in residential and working environments can impact health and well-being. Insufficient lighting strains the eyes, causes fatigue, and generally creates an uncomfortable space, which affects both our visual and overall comfort. There are immediate health effects, such as eye strain, headaches, fatigue, risk of accidents due to reduced visibility. But there are also long-term effects when we are exposed to poor lighting, which can lead to chronic eye strain, musculoskeletal issues from bad posture, and reduced overall well-being.
Lena, can I just ask there, with the poor posture, is that because people are adjusting because they're sort of squinting to look at a screen? How does the poor posture come in with lighting?
Exactly. Because of bad lighting design, you just don't have the right posture, and that affects your body.
So then you were just saying that this brings about reduced overall well-being, and that contributes to stress.
Exactly. Stress, anxiety, and general decreased quality of life.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dan, the same question to you, please.
Similar sort of impacts, really. And if you think about it, it's just a different sense, isn't it? It's all waves bouncing around and potentially annoying us. I'm going to start with a bit of a statistic, actually. There is the EU Environmental Noise Directive, and that estimated a few years ago that 18 million people were highly annoyed by noise, and that 5 million people were highly sleep disturbed as part of a long-term exposure. And this is the transport noise sources as well. So just going back to the 18 million people that are highly annoyed, 14 million of those are impacted by road traffic. And there's the short-term effects of this, which is things like you'll wake up a little bit grumpy if you've not slept particularly well on a nighttime before. So that's sort of your short-term stuff that impacts your cognitive ability to be able to go to work, and it affects your mood as well. But the long-term effects are the ones that are really interesting. So the World Health Organization guidelines, this is for the European region in particular as well, where we've actually got some pretty good guidance, says that it can cause an increase in cardiovascular disease, annoyance, cognitive impairment, hearing impairment and tinnitus. Adverse birth outcomes was the one that I found absolutely fascinating as well as part of this. Quality of life and metabolic outcomes. Type 2 diabetes is something that can occur if you have poor long-term health effects, particularly on your sleep.
I'm absolutely flabbergasted by that. That's extraordinary. I'd have thought sleep, anxiety and cognitive, but some of the, like the metabolic and the birth outcomes, I mean, that's quite shocking. This is a question for both of you. Why do you think people are often unaware of how much their indoor environments affect them? And how do we raise awareness about this? Lena, I'll come back to you first, please.
So I think one important factor of this unawareness is familiarity. So we grow up and live in indoor environments that often have mediocre design. And by nature, individuals tend to prefer familiar surroundings over those that look different from what they're used to. Another factor is that many people do not consciously recognize the impact of good design, because in fast-paced environments, individuals focus more on their activities and responsibilities rather than how they feel within spaces. And this leads to a disconnect from their emotional world with a stronger emphasis on practicality.
Thank you, Lena. That's absolutely fascinating. Dan, over to you, please. I mean, how do you feel we should be raising awareness of these issues? I mean, obviously, a podcast like this is going to be hugely helpful, but what else can we be doing?
I think we have a great role to play as part of an education piece through sort of the education sector as well, through talks and general awareness. I think things like, this modern age of using things like social media to raise that awareness as well and get these reports more sort of widely focused. I saw something on the BBC the other day that started to talk for the first time about cardiovascular effects because of the impact of noise. So it is getting out there. There was a survey of 27 countries in the EU back in 2010. 80% of the respondents believe that noise had a negative effect on their health to some or a greater extent. But my firm belief on that, when you look at the sort of distribution and the numbers, and I've tried to fall asleep in my partner's mum's house, which is in Italy, which, there is a culture with the glazing in particular there, that it doesn't have the same standards as we have in the UK. It is noisy there. It is very, very noisy. And then, again, when I go from my nice quiet house in the UK to a noisy place, it then becomes an issue, and then people start to then talk about it. Should I buy some earplugs? Should I put a fan on? Should I put some music on in the background?
So now you two, I mean, in a way, there's something Lena said then that really jumped out at me. And that's that, I mean, it's very unfair on you two that there's this truth that people don't notice the impact of good design. If you two have done your jobs well, which I'm assuming you do on a daily basis, people don't notice. That's really unfair. But let's talk about this wonderful stuff you do, these amazing designs that you do. What are the solutions? What are some of the subtle ways buildings influence, in a positive way, the ways that we feel, sleep and focus, often without us noticing? And I'll come on to neurodiversity and inclusivity in a bit, but for now, let's broadly talk about some of the strategies that you both employ. And Dan, I'll go to you first this time, please.
It's about control, and allowing for that control is sort of that design philosophy, I guess, that I always like to start with. Again, we'll come on to that neurodiversity piece, which again, lighting is a huge part of that, as well as our neuro-inclusive environments. That lighting and acoustics are the sort of the top two things that people tend to have negative comments about when it isn't designed particularly well. It's things like in your office setting, for example, having a choice of space to be able to go to. Are you in your open plan office able to work in the environment where you've got other people around you? And the sorts of things that we look at is the materiality of the stuff that we put in that space. So broadly with acoustics, how much sound absorbing stuff do we put in there? And, we're sitting in here in our little acoustically treated rooms at the minute doing this podcast with the microphones, and it sounds sort of effortless and clear and great. But how do we do that in an office? We actually very, very fine tune the spaces in terms of what we call the reverberation time. So it's how much sound we allow to bounce around a space, and are we allowing that to bounce over into an adjacent working area so that it can annoy our colleagues sitting in a space where they're trying to have a meeting while, we're shouting away on a Teams call in the background as well. And I guess with Lena, it's sort of a similar thing as well. I know that some of the lighting engineers previously have told me that it's about choice, and about task lighting as well has been one of the key things in unlocking that flexibility. Is that something you could tell us a little bit more about?
Yeah, so all these things you mentioned are relevant, like controls and flexibility, providing adjustable lighting scenarios that allow spaces to adapt to different needs and activities. And this flexibility can create inclusive space to correspond to different needs and individual preferences. And with lighting, there are other factors that make a good lighting design, such as lighting intensity, which prevents eye strain and headaches. Having like a nice uniformity, so this ensures that lighting distributes uniform over task areas and floor, and avoid contrast and shadows. Color temperature, glare control, high CRI. High CRI ensures that colors are rendered accurately. And also, probably on top of all, I would put natural light as well, because it's important to maintain a connection with the outside world. Because as humans, we are part of the environment, and we shouldn't be detached or isolate from it. So it's important to have wall openings and windows providing the opportunity of this connection with the outside world. And maximizing natural light also regulates the circadian rhythms and improves sleep quality, reduces stress, and all these things we mentioned already.
Fantastic. Lena, there is something called circadian lighting, isn't there? And can you talk a little bit about that and how that compares with the circadian lighting and dynamic lighting? If you could talk a little bit about those two, please. And are either of them ever truly a substitute for good old daylight, as you were alluding to?
Yeah. Circadian lighting is basically a lighting strategy designed to align with our natural biological rhythms. So these rhythms regulate physical, mental, and behavioral changes in response to light. So circadian light aims to provide the right intensity and spectrum of light at different times of the day, mimicking the natural variations of daylight. And this can be achieved through adjusting brightness, changing color temperature, and modifying light wavelengths. And in this way, lighting feels more dynamic and natural instead of being static all day. So definitely circadian lighting can mimic natural light to some extent and provide benefits to mood and productivity, but it cannot replace the unique qualities of natural light. Natural light often offers dynamic changes throughout the day and contributes to visual comfort and the sense of time and space that the artificial lighting cannot fully replicate.
Thank you, Lena. And just one quick additional question there, and I'm talking as a layperson here, but I think I know what it means. But when you talk about color temperature, can you just give me a nice little summary for a simple mind like mine?
So color temperature is like, let's say, refers to how warm or cool white light is.
Right.
So like 2020 Kelvin is very warm light. 3000 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin is natural. And over 4,000 is cool. So when we say dynamic or tunable white light is just changing from warm to cool and adapting to different needs.
I see. Thank you, Lena. And so color temperatures, how do they affect us? What do those different temperatures do to us and for us?
Yeah, like very, very roughly, I would say that, for example, in an office environment where we need to focus and be productive, we would prefer neutral to not cool, but, of like 3000 to 4000 Kelvin. Whereas in scenarios where we want to relax, we would prefer warmer light. Neutral or cool light leads to alertness and production, whereas warmer color temperatures are more relaxing, calming.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lena. And in a way, the way you talk about the palette, if you will, of different lights and the way they affect us in different ways, it makes me think, Dan, about, well, I knew about white noise, but I had no idea that there was this whole rainbow of noise. There's white, there's pink, there's brown, there's green, there's a frequency for everything, it would appear. And on the subject of frequencies, noise masking, you were talking to me during our pre-record, we were talking about noise masking and the use of certain frequencies in there. But it's way more complicated than that. What is noise masking and how is it applied in our office spaces?
I love noise masking. This is my favorite topic. Outside of the neurodiversity thing, it's my favorite topic, noise masking. It's something that has happened and been installed in the States for quite a while now. It's something that's kind of relatively new. And they put it in our new offices in BH in London, actually. So basically what noise masking is, and there's various forms. You actually put it stick it under the floor as well, under the floorboards. They do that in some of the open plan offices. And they turn it up so loud that basically it just transmits through the floor. The whole floor starts to vibrate, basically. How we have it in our office in Buro Happold in London is we have some little dome speakers that actually point up towards the ceiling. What they are tuned to do, and it sits somewhere around that spectrum and sort of language of white noise, pink noise. Our speech usually sits in this range that we call TMF, that is about 500 hertz to 2 kilohertz, basically. So
what does TMF stand for?
T means time, basically. So it's reverberation time. And usually, what reverberation time is, it is the time that it takes sound to decay in a space. So usually what we have is T and then a number. So 60. So T60 is what we typically measure as acousticians, and that is the time that it takes for the sound within that space to decay by 60 decibels. So, noise masking is a speaker system that is specifically tuned to that speech frequency particularly. That's where we're interested. And what we do is we actually raise what we call the background noise level, which is, the stuff just ambient going around us. We raise that up a little bit in order to provide some masking. So I know that people aren't going to be able to see the webcam on this, but just for the benefit of the people on the call, I'm just putting my hand out at the minute, and that is showing a speech noise level. So,
and it's just around, it's level with Dan's forehead, listeners, just so you know.
So we speak at somewhere between 60 and 65 decibels. dBA is what we call it, A weighted, at about a metre. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that at a couple of meters away, and sound does decay as we move further away in distance, it gets quieter as you move further from, a speaker, someone that's trying to talk to you. At the next desk or the next set of seats where people don't really want to listen to us, that we produce a noise level that is greater than that speech by the time it reaches that position, basically.
Right.
So it is a fantastic tool for us to use in open plan spaces.
In terms of decibels, is there a range of natural comfort for the human ear? What's a nice decibel? What's starting to get a bit much for our delicate little earlets?
There's a lovely World Health Organization figure on this one. It's 50, which is a nice round value. The definition for it is few people are annoyed above 50 decibels. And there's the next value is 55 decibels. It says few people are significantly annoyed at levels below 55. So 50 is a nice round number, I guess, isn't it? So let's go with that.
I like that,
great.
50, that's lovely. So Lena, when we talk about kelvins, what is a kelvin?
So it's just the base unit of the color temperature. The same way you would say meters for lengths, you say Kelvin for light color temperature.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. So it's the unit of measurement. That's lovely. Thank you very much, Jan. Now, we've been talking a lot about good design and finding control and finding balance. It's almost like finding that wonderful Goldilocks zone. For example, balancing acoustic comfort with thermal comfort, that hot summer's night when we want to have the window open but the cars are coming past. Maybe, Dan, this happens to you when you're in Italy in that lovely sultry summer air. But obviously there are regulations at play here. What are the roles of building regulations in the jobs that you two do? I mean, I think there's one part O, is that right? Which addresses overheating. Lena, I'll go to you first. How do regulations affect what you do?
Usually in lighting, there are regulations based on the location. So there are like British standards, European standards, like USA standards. And from these standards, there are like requirements for lux levels on the floor or in task areas. And there are also requirements about uniformity, about glare or other technical characteristics of light. There are some general rules that are common in all locations, I would say. So, for example, a task area should have 300 to 500 luxes. This is something international. Apart from that, when we're working on a project, it's good to check the local standards as well, because it might be different from area to area.
Thank you, Lena. And Dan, the same question to you, please.
Building regs. We've got a few to go out in the UK, but the key one, I think, is part O. And funnily enough, it's called overheating. I don't know how they managed to land on part E, which is our other one, which is to do with sound insulation between apartments. But they luckily managed to save O for overheating. So well done, them. So part O, it is actually more of a bit of a shout out to our colleagues in sustainability and physics. Love the work that they do with their TM52 and now TM59 assessments. So part O basically says it's about removing excess heat from our apartments. It's like, how hot is it, and is that okay for people? Is my crude understanding of the world that they have to contend with. And they have weather files and all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and they consider how long you open windows for and shading and how long you cook and all that sort of stuff. Basically, where acoustics slots in, and I helped with the development of this as well for the building regs, is during that period when it is hot and you're trying to get the heat out of your apartment, which historically people have tried to sling the windows open to get rid of that excess heat. Can we balance a suitable internal noise level within those apartments as well? And there's been this disconnect historically. You know, if you want to keep your noise out, you close your window. But if you want to let your heat out, you need to open it. So how do you balance those two things? And there's all sorts of weird and wonderful solutions that we've come up with over the last few years. I'm a particular fan of the passive ventilators, which is a louver that you stick in your facade. And we have to, again, you have to pass this with your facade engineers and with your planning consultants. It goes through your planning as well, because it's how your building looks. And instead of opening a window, you open a louver, because you can acoustically attenuate a louver to let the sound go through it, because you can do all these funny little shapes and acoustic absorption and all that sort of stuff.
Almost like a baffle, so you can, so you let the heat, oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So you can let that heat out, but you attenuate the noise as it comes in. So that's one of my favourites, and I particularly like that because we don't want to be going down the route of mechanical cooling, do we? Because it's the cost of putting it in, and it's mainly the sustainability piece, isn't it?
When you say mechanical cooling, is that like your air conditioning? Is that sort of thing? Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Precisely.
Yeah. And Dan, I'm guessing, because you've done a lot of work recently with music venues in Leeds, and I imagine you've been having to pick your way through quite a labyrinth of regulations there. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. There's the balance of working with the local authorities as well through the planning process. So we have our counterparts as the environmental health officers, which are basically the acoustics experts that work for the local authorities, that we have to be able to demonstrate to the people and the folks there that, you know, when a planning application for a new building goes ahead, that we have done everything that we can to make sure that they're not going to get noise complaints. Because inevitably what's going to happen otherwise is residents will move in, they'll hear the noise if it's not designed correctly, and they'll phone up their local environmental health officer and start complaining. They don't want that because it's workload, isn't it? So we have this lovely conversation as we're going through the design process, and we help a lot of our clients with the planning process as well, to be able to help them design the things they need for the end users, which is the ultimate goal. It's got to be comfortable for the end users to be able to use the spaces. But we've got to do that within the regulations and the planning framework as well. With the music venues, it's really challenging to unlock that noise generating space next to a noise sensitive space. And how do you, and I like this phrase of, how do you allow those things to coexist at the same time? So we've been working really hard with the music venues and with the local authorities and with the developers to get everybody to sort of come down and hold hands and say, look, we're going to make sure that we don't obstruct your operation as a music venue, Because, cities are cultural spots and we are music lovers and we like to go to these music events, but there's also a massive demand for housing as well. So how do you balance those two things? And we found some wonderful stuff as part of this, that now we're having these conversations with some charities as well to help them develop some guidance in the future to avoid this sort of scenario. And on a final technical note on this, what was really, really interesting about this whole process technically was that the worst thing about controlling noise from music venues is the glazing. It's really challenging. So lower frequency is 125 hertz, which is where sort of your bass guitar sort of sound has got to sit. That's the frequency at which glazing likes to rattle and resonate, basically. So we've had to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things about, the configuration of the glazing that we have to look at, which makes a right job for our facade engineers as well. So there's some lovely tie-ins with our facade engineering team. I love working with them because we can really get into the nuts and bolts on some technical stuff. And it's really wholesome because I would love to have a music venue next door because I'd be down there every day. It'd be great.
Well, exactly. I think, and music venues, they need us at the moment, don't they? They need that support. So this is wonderful. This is an excellent way to support them. So, Dan, in direct contrast to a bass guitar making windows rattle, is it true that an opera singer can shatter a glass with a particularly high note? And if so, is there a particular note?
I believe it's going to be a combination of notes of frequency and level, about 100 to 105 decibels. So you're really going some to be able to produce that level of noise. So it's going to be the natural frequency of the glass that we would need to excite. So maybe what they need to do as glass manufacturers is to start telling people what the natural frequency of the glass is. Maybe they print it on the bottom. They've got those little safety warnings on the bottoms of glasses, haven't they? Maybe they need to tell us what the natural frequency is just in case we don't decide to start to produce that note when we have our at-home karaoke sessions.
Yeah, warning, keep away from opera singers, that sort of thing. It's a serious issue that we all need to think about when buying our glassware. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dan. Now we're going to come on to neurodiversity. Now, even a layperson like me can see that all of this, the acoustics and the lighting, is going to have a profound benefit for inclusivity and neurodiversity. And Dan, I know that you're the acoustic lead for the neurodiversity service offering, so I'm going to come back onto that in a bit. But Lena, tell me about how lighting can make, let's start with an office space, a better place for somebody with neurodiversity, please.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we mentioned in the beginning. I think it's important to have different type of spaces, creating some subspaces within space. So create quiet zones.
When you say quiet zones, are we talking about lighting here?
Where lights can be dimmed, for example, for times when people want to relax. And then we can also have like private working spaces, options for private, quiet working areas within the open plan offices where people can focus and avoid being overwhelmed by multiple stimuli. And also we can have like dynamic spaces with adjustable lights and collaboration spaces where people can work in groups or focus individually. And these different kind of spaces, like lights, can be individually controlled. So they meet its individual's needs.
Yeah, so it's got to be really user-friendly, Lena. Would that be?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent stuff. And Lena, would you say that the growing awareness around well-being and neurodiversity, is that changing the way that buildings are being designed? I'm assuming it is, but if you could talk a little bit around, in fact, how buildings are being designed and indeed retrofitted. Are we seeing big changes there?
I think there are some changes that reflect a holistic approach to building design. So there is increased natural light, larger windows, skylights, and open spaces to maximize natural light. Flexible lighting solutions, as we mentioned a minute ago. So implementing adjustable lighting scenarios to host different activities throughout the day. And also biophilic design is very popular at the moment.
Tell me about biophilic design. I love that word.
So it's incorporating natural elements like plants, water, and natural materials to create a connection with nature.
Love it. Excellent stuff. So that dovetailing with the natural daylight. I love it. Thank you very much, Lena. And Dan, like I say, you're the acoustic lead for the neurodiversity service offering. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
This is something very wholesome and very close to home for me. So I am a person with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I have something, my particular subtype of that is called inattentive as well, so that means that if I can forget, I will. So I'm having to, throughout this podcast, refer back to all the notes we talked about the other day as well, which has been, it's been a wonderful experience.
You're doing a cracking job.
Having me on this. Thank you. So the neurodiversity service offering, it's a service offering about creating spaces that are neuro-inclusive. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about what it is, basically, at a base level. So it is for everyone, which is neuro-inclusive as a word. Neurodivergent is what someone such as myself may describe themselves as. So that is the 15 to 20% that are, and a colleague that I work with, Jean, in our inclusive environments team, who I've worked with for a long time, is very wonderful, basically described it something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, that we are different enough to be called neurodivergent. So there is something that separates us from everyone else. But what I really love about the service offering is that if you design to the sorts of standards that we're looking at, and Jean took part in, and she was sponsored to develop something called the PAS 6463, which hopefully will at some point become a British standard. And I provided a bit of support for the acoustics as part of that as well. And talking about the acoustics part, we took standards that we knew worked. We looked at schools, and bureaus are the Department for Education's preferred contractor or an acoustician for schools. We work as part of that team. So we do a lot of schools.
Sorry, Buro Happold, did you say? Yeah. Oh, well,
yes. So not contractor. We're the preferred acousticians for this piece of work. And as part of that, we know from feedback from the schools that we have designed that acoustic design works. What we've done is we've taken that thinking and we took it a step further and we made it more stringent fundamentally, because we know that people who are neurodivergent can experience along the lines of sensory processing differences, which is basically where, and I experience this all the time on things like the tube, which is particularly noisy, it's particularly packed, and it's particularly bright as well. I've actually ordered some new tinted glasses to quell some of the light that comes into us. But so as part of all this, it's producing an environment that it's not targeted at neurodivergent people. It's targeted at everyone. And that is the thing that, for me, that's really important, is that it therefore creates a space that's neuro-inclusive so that it works for all of us as well.
That's a really interesting and important distinction, actually. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, we've been focusing very largely on businesses so far, the office space, but how about residential? Because obviously, I'd like to think we do spend quite a bit of time in our lovely homes. In what way are your approaches, Lena and Dan, in what way are your approaches different when it comes to designing residential as opposed to offices? And what are the immutable universal truths, best practice, if you will, of acoustic and lighting across all buildings? So, Lena, I'll go to you first. What's different? What's the same between residential and offices when it comes to lighting, please?
The overall principles are the same, but I would say in a residential project or in our own homes, I would say that personal comfort comes first. So because it's your own space, we should prioritize our own comfort and safety. If it feels nice for you, it's nice. That's it.
Yeah.
But of course, we need to have like a good general illumination and task illumination in terms of light levels in uniformity. But other than that, it's good to have multiple lighting sources to offer this flexibility and create the proper atmosphere for different times of the day and different circumstances. And then is the lighting scenarios, which we already mentioned. This is applicable in residential projects as well.
The adaptability, the easy user interface, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and having different scenarios, like having one scenario for a celebration, let's say, or a different scenario when you want to do something like a task, like having a different setting of lights.
I see. So that's fascinating. So the lighting can make you focus in different ways. Yeah.
So it's the same lighting sources, but some of them are dimmed, some of them are off, some of them are warmer or cooler. So the lights are the same, but different settings create different atmospheres. And then I would also say the furniture layout is important to arrange furniture to maximize natural lighting from windows and skylights. So position workspaces and task areas near the openings.
Okay, so it's almost like the way the light can travel through your room if you've got sort of sofas blocking bits.
But also it makes more sense to have like your office next to the window rather than your sofa, for example, because you need light to work.
Okay, I see what you mean. So in fact, actually, that brings me on, Lena, rather nicely to when you're looking at home design, and indeed, actually, this also applies to office design, what are some of the most common mistakes you see when it comes to lighting and configurations thereof?
I would say a common mistake is lack of flexibility. So many spaces, even nowadays, fail to adapt to different needs and individual preferences. Lighting can offer this flexibility with different scenarios and controls. Another frequent issue is, this is more for offices, is glare coming from light sources or insufficient illumination, which fails to offer comfort people to complete their tasks.
Thank you, Lena. Dan, same question to you. When we talk about home rather than office, what are the things that are the same? What are the things that are different?
It's really similar, but I guess it's in terms of use. And I'm going to go back to that point that Lena made. It's the use of the space. And that's the thing that drives what we do. So in an office space, we want to provide a level of privacy. So we talked about noise masking earlier on, Andy, my favourite topic. We want to be designing noise levels so they're up at that 40, 45, 50 decibel mark. So we can provide a degree of privacy in a big space. What we want to be doing is we want to be designing it so it's really lovely and quiet, so that we provide a brilliant baseline for people to then be able to create the acoustic environment that they want. So some people, and this is where it gets a bit subjective, and what we do as designers is we provide them a lovely baseline that's quiet. And then, for example, like me, I will choose to use some noise masking at nighttime, and I will use an app, and I've got a little speaker that sits on my bedside that just plays some white or pink noise that masks some of the surrounding environment.
Sorry, Dan, just
well.
very quickly, I have to know,
Sure.
when you talk about pink noise, because this is something I've just learned about recently, just tell me very quickly, what is pink noise as opposed to white noise?
So, pink noise has an equal amount of energy in each band. It's unweighted. It gets a little bit technical. Fundamentally, if I was to really simplify it, I would say it's got more energy at the low end than white noise does. It's a bit bassier, fundamentally, compared to white noise. And because of that, it's a little bit better at masking that lower frequency sound as well.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, sorry, Dan, I actually talked over you, didn't I?
Yes. I was going to just talk about briefly some of the collaborations that we have as well in the residential space to form this baseline. We have to have some incredible collaborations with our structural engineers as well. And that's to do with designing things like floors and how much sound our neighbours are producing upstairs. Can you hear them hammering away on the floor, throwing bowling balls and all that sort of stuff in apartments? We have to be able to control that noise, and that's covered by statutory regulations as well, which is brilliant. I think one of the frustrations as an acoustician looking at this for years has been that things don't happen until it becomes statutory. It's the same with noise coming in from the outside, and that's what sits with the planners as well. So again, we have a lovely crossover with our facade engineering team. So we're designing these things to stop the noise from coming in. We've got the mechanical services, so bring in the noise. It's often mechanically ventilated now in apartments with fans. So we have that crossover to make sure that the fans aren't too noisy with the mechanical engineers as well. And as I mentioned, we've got our sustainability folks as well, who we have to balance that overheating argument with as well. So it's not just the acoustics. I would guess it's a little bit more holistic than that in terms of the design approach that we've got to have. And there's a lot of moving parts, basically.
Yeah. There's some beautiful teamwork along the way. Now, we are going to clamber into our soothingly lit, acoustically treated time machine and head off to the future. And we're going to jump forward about 10 years. What is this future going to look like in terms of optimised lighting and acoustics in our homes and our offices? Lena, let's have your glimpse into the future, please.
Well, predicting the exact status in 10 years is a little bit unpredictable, especially with the rapid development of AI and technology. But for me, ideally, I would like the technologies to serve humans effectively and promoting inclusive environments for everyone, as Dan said earlier. We can do some imaginative scenarios for this adaptability, flexibility, and inclusivity at its maximum. Maybe technologies and equipment will be capable of reading our minds and needs and adapt the environment accordingly. So allow for dynamic changes in lighting intensity, color temperature, selectively switching lights or dimming lights on a specific area or on the item we want to focus. So yeah, maybe it will happen.
Well, I like that little glimpse into the future, Lena. And how about you, Dan? What do you see or hear in 10 years' time in our offices and our homes?
I think there's the realistic, and I think, Andy, last time we talked about, someone mentioned a movie as well, or made reference.
Oh, yes, I think it was a film from the 70s. It was very prescient. I can't remember what the film was called, but yeah.
Demon Seed. It's just popped into
Demon Seed,
my head now.
Yes, our producer and her eclectic and esoteric knowledge of horror throughout the ages.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Lucy. Shout out for you on that one. I think there's a really dry point that I'm going to make first, which I think that regulation is going to slowly catch up with what the reality is. It always takes its time and it always lumbers a little bit, but things like Part O coming out have started to make a massive step change in the way that we design things, in the way that we design buildings, particularly in the residential space. And I think if we give something like Part O, I think it's going to take another few years for that to start really trickling through, and for innovation to then rear its head as to the sorts of design solutions that sort of really are really impactful. I think there's going to be this phase of development now, responding to what the challenge is. I feel like that's going to happen in the neurodiversity space as well. I think as people become more aware of the challenges, I think that then the technology is going to help us overcome them as well. And talking about Lena's point earlier and referring to Demon Seed, I think, for example, I think we had this chat previously, Andy, as well, where, you know, we have noise targets during the day and the night time. So particularly at the night when we like to sleep. But the challenge is that if you open your window at the night time, at the beginning of the night, and it is classified, actually. We say between 11 at night and 7 in the morning is night. The challenge is then your sleep's got to be disturbed at 6 o'clock in the morning when the traffic starts. And you're not going to get out of your bed and close your window, and you're not actively going to be able to do that. So what I would love is a technology that knows what you need.
Yes.
And you don't have to think, I am hot, I'm going to get out the window. It needs to be somewhere in your subconscious, doesn't it? I guess. And aware of you while you're asleep and go, do you know what? It's getting a bit noisy outside. Maybe there's a microphone strapped to your house. Maybe it's getting a bit noisy outside. And I know that they need to get some more sleep. And I also know that they're a little bit uncomfortably hot. How it's going to tell that, I don't know. We strap a thermometer to ourselves.
Yeah. Changes in, body temperature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And as a design solution, it's not a design solution in terms of something physical that you've got to put in, but it is a management solution.
Yeah.
And it's just something that's going to know, and it's going to be able to make that choice and do it for us. An actuator on a window. It's just going to know what we need at that moment of time, and the house will do it for us, and hopefully not turn into a Demon Seed scenario.
Yeah, let's hope not. Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you're right, because I like sleeping with the window open in the summer, but 2:30 without fail, a milk float goes past, and it's arguably the loudest vehicle on the earth. And so it'd be lovely if my window could just automatically shut at 2:30. But there we go. Thank you both very much. There we have it. When it comes to building design and well-being, the future is bright. Well, not bright, but adaptably and flexibly lit and acoustically treated. It is so wonderful to see and hear how the role of the built environment in well-being is being given the credence it deserves. And as always on Sandbox, we are learning that education is key. We want you to get involved, dear listener. Join the conversation by using the hashtag #BHSandbox on X, that's the artist formerly known as Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the show. You'll find Sandbox in all the usual sources of podcast goodness. Tell us your top tips for a good night's sleep, or what innovations have been introduced in your office or your home to help productivity, creativity, and relaxation. Tell us all. In the meantime, I'm off for a bit of well-deserved shut-eye. Thanks for listening. Night-night.